Forensic genealogy, the process of identifying unknown offenders through their DNA by finding genetic relatives and building out family trees. It's taken the crime-solving world by storm. How does it work, and what are these cases all about? Find out on Season 4 of DNA ID, the only podcast that exclusively covers the revolutionary technique that is forensic genealogy. This season, you'll hear more than 20 solved cases like Pamela Kahanis, Rachel Johnson, and Krista Martin. And of course, we'll continue with our coverage of doe identifications that we began in Season 3. Don't miss the Season 4 premiere of DNA ID on Monday, January 29th, wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hello, Megan, and hello, listeners. Today's case takes us to the Virginia Commonwealth University. While we normally cover murder cases on this show, today's story is less a murder and more a tragic accident that had lethal consequences. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to cover this case was because there's a lot of nuance in here about an issue that has plagued colleges for generations, and that is the issue of hazing. Hazing is defined as humiliating and sometimes dangerous initiation ritual, and hazing is often synonymous with becoming a member of fraternities and sororities in colleges. Now, while these have become fairly non-existent in recent years, between 1959 and 2021, at least one student a year had died in the U.S. due to hazing rituals. One of the last of these students was a 19-year-old pledge to Delta Chi fraternity, and that is Adam Oakes. But before we get to Adam, let's take a minute to orient ourselves with the school and the fraternity. Virginia Commonwealth University, also known as VCU, is only around 50 years old, which in terms of universities is quite young. An offshoot of the Hampton-Sydney Medical College, Virginia Commonwealth currently hosts around 200 academic programs for over 30,000 students. Interestingly, though they grew out of a medical college, their top 3 ranking programs are all in the fine arts.
Sorry, I was just thinking 30,000. Every time I hear that, I'm always surprised because 30,000 is so tremendous. It's its own city.
Yeah, our school is probably, 5,000, if that?
Our school, the campus that we work on, it's interesting. I don't know how many are on the Metro campus, significantly more, a couple times, but our campus only has about 3,500. We're definitely considered, a small liberal arts school. But even the university that I went to was a mid-sized school. I think I was a little bit intimidated by a school of that size, just even thinking, how could I get around?
Yeah, Megan, I went to Rutgers, so I would imagine Rutgers is probably a similar size to this university that we're talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't surprise me. You wanted like the city feel, the big city feel, right?
Yes, I like to be a little fish in a big pond.
Okay.
All right, so Virginia Commonwealth University, they have a fairly robust Greek life on their campus, with 30 different fraternities and sororities to choose from. And about 1,200 of their students are involved in Greek life. And now this may seem fairly small given the size of the school, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't actually know much about this school and their Greek life.
Well, that's a significant number of fraternities and sororities. I mean, for comparative purposes, when I went to school, again, I think we had less than 20 combined, and my school size was about 10,000.
That makes sense. I don't know how many Rutgers had. Well, you were in a sorority, Megan?
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I was in a sorority for pretty much all of college. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see
I
that.
lived in a sorority house. For 1 year, then I lived somewhere else for another. It was, looking back now, I don't think sorority life was for me really at all, but the friends I made are, my closest friends still. So that was invaluable.
Very nice. I was in my sorority for only one semester, but I too am still friends with people I met during that one semester. So I definitely see why people would be interested in Greek life. And Adam Oakes, he was very interested in Greek life, and he in particular was interested in Delta Chi. Now, Delta Chi started as a law fraternity in the 1890s and was first recognized at Cornell University, but has since expanded to 111 chapters at various institutions. And according to their website, Delta Chi's core values are building friendships, developing character, advancing justice, and assisting in the acquisition of a sound education. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And Megan, many recognizable men were members of this fraternity, such as actor Ashton Kutcher and Kevin Costner, astronaut Henry Hartsfield, and the U.S.'s 23rd president, Benjamin Harrison.
Oh, interesting.
And Adam wanted to be a part of this prestigious history. Adam Oakes ended up at Virginia Commonwealth University for one very specific reason. It's because it was close to his home. As an only child, Adam enjoyed spending time with his parents and his extended family, in particular his grandfather. Unfortunately, his grandfather was suffering from stage 4 lung cancer around the time that Adam was selecting a college. And Adam wanted to make sure he could spend as much time with his grandfather as possible. So even while he was going to school, he wanted to keep his ties to home. And conveniently, VCU had a bus that went right to his hometown of Potomac Falls. Adam knew that he could be on that bus and at his grandfather's door in under 2 hours if he needed to be. So he decided that this would be his school of choice. And as I said, VCU is a very large university, and this could be a bit overwhelming for a young freshman.
Yeah.
And while Adam was described by his friends and family as a gregarious, happy person who made friends easily, he was looking to find some deeper camaraderie on campus and decided, like many students, that the best way to do this would be to join a fraternity. During Rush Week, Delta Chi's president, Jason Mulgrew, and the rest of the brothers were looking over their potential candidates, and Adam really stuck out to them. Jason remembers, quote, Adam was very outgoing, very funny, always had a smile on his face. He was easy to talk to and had a lot in common with many of the chapter brothers. And he says that they decided that if anyone was going to get a bid, it definitely would have to be Adam. And Adam was ecstatic about getting a bid for his first pick fraternity, and even more so at gaining a big brother and the camaraderie that the fraternity brought him.
Mm-hmm.
On February 26, 2021, Adam joined the rest of the Delta Chi pledges at the fraternity house around 8 p.m. for their big little ceremony. Did you have one of these ceremonies?
Of course. Yeah, of course. It was like a big deal.
Yes, I remember waiting to find out who your big was going to be. It was no pun intended, but it was such a big deal. Whose family were you going to be in, right?
Yeah, I remember that too. I also remember, as you mentioned, waiting for the bids to come in. That was exciting, being in your dorms and you would get the bids and seeing, which did you get your top choice and all that. I mean, this is somewhat part of a college experience.
And I'm assuming, like mine, your big little ceremony was probably a little bit different than the one I'm about to describe, because I have a feeling that fraternities and sororities do things a little bit different when it comes to ceremonious occasions.
I think so.
So for this Delta Chi chapter, the ceremony consisted of pledges waiting in an upstairs bedroom for their name to be called while the brothers gathered below in the foyer around the staircase. Now, once called, the pledges joined the pledge master on the stairwell, and they were introduced to their big brother, who would be their mentor and support system in the fraternity. Now, the big brother gifted the pledge with a bottle of alcohol, as was commonplace in a lot of fraternities. The big brother would take a drink first, chugging back a swig before passing the bottle to his new little. The little was then expected to also chug from the bottle in a show of sharing this drink with their new big brother, and in doing so, sealing their vows to the fraternity. Adam's big brother, Andrew White, greeted him on the stairs with a smile as he threw back a few shots of Jack Daniel's whiskey. He then leaned in and told Adam that when he was in Adam's shoes, he'd been able to finish the whole bottle.
Ugh.
He then gifted Adam a mostly full handle of Jack Daniels. And Megan, just for reference, a handle holds almost 40 shots and is around 140 proof.
That is so unbelievable, and it's so excessive to talk about drinking a bottle. It's terrifying.
Well, I do want to point out for clarification that as far as I could find, nobody specifically told Adam that he had to drink the whole bottle in one go. And there was certainly no requirement for him to finish it in order to, say, pass the initiation. But based on what the other pledges before him had done, it seemed expected that downing the bottle was the intent.
It might not be a requirement, but there's peer pressure. I mean, there is the pressure. It's almost coercion, but not quite. Someone telling you I was able to drink the whole bottle, people cheering you on, they're looking at you. There's an expectation, and it's really hard to overcome that expectation.
Yeah, and we're talking about young adults. Some people just on the brink of, young adulthood. And unfortunately, Adam did what the others did, and he chugged the equivalent of around 35 shots in under a few minutes.
This is terrible.
His big Andrew was excited that Adam had not only finished the bottle, but had done so really quickly. Andrew then took Adam out to the backyard where he showed Adam how to purge the whiskey. Andrew threw up himself, since he'd also drank quite a bit, and Adam followed suit. Andrew recalled that he watched Adam throw up to make sure that he'd purged properly, and when he was finished, Andrew was confident that Adam would be okay, as they had done this for initiation several times before. So this was kind of the usual order of events. You would chug it, then someone would make sure that you threw up, and then maybe the night would just continue on. So he brought Adam back inside, and the two went back to the pledge party. But Megan, about an hour later, Andrew noticed that Adam was missing. So he went looking, and he found Adam back outside, leaning over the deck as if he was throwing up a second time. Adam's knees buckled, and he swayed a bit, and Andrew realized that despite all the vomiting, Adam was still very, very drunk. So he called several of the other brothers to help him get Adam back inside, where they would lay him down on the floor with a pillow and a blanket, and they figured he just needed to sleep it off. And Megan, normally that's what college kids would need to do, just kind of sleep it off, right? But we're talking about a lot of alcohol here.
It's the amount. It's too significant.
And, I think the brothers probably did what they normally did. They stayed with him for a few more hours. Andrew would check on him throughout the night to make sure he was okay. And when Andrew heard him snoring, he felt that everything would be fine. And in the morning, he planned to bring his new little a Gatorade and take him out to brunch to celebrate.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
At 9 a.m. on February 27th, Andrew White woke up to his cell phone going off. And it was going off a lot. It wasn't just one or two texts. There was a lot of texts coming through. And it was from the fraternity group chat. And when Andrew opened it, he was met with horrific shock. There were frantic texts saying, "Adam's not waking up. We can't wake him up. I think Adam is dead."
Oh, my God.
The brothers rushed to call 911, but Adam was pronounced dead by the first responders who came to the scene. Megan, his autopsy would later reveal that he had a blood alcohol level of 0.419, which is a toxicity so high that it induces shallow breathing and coma. And Megan, unbeknownst to his fraternity brothers, remember I said they had heard him snoring and took that as a sign that he was okay, when in fact Adam's snoring had not been sleep. It was shallow breathing that was caused by alcohol poisoning, and this was right before Adam fell into a coma.
So unfortunately and sadly, what they actually heard was him dying.
Yeah, they did. And I could understand why I wouldn't have known that as a college student. If I heard someone snoring that drank a lot, I would never assume that that was a sign of danger. I would also think they were sleeping soundly.
I would have thought the same, in fairness, then as well.
Almost immediately, police arrested the 11 fraternity brothers who had been in the house while Adam lay in a coma on their floor. Now, each of the young men were taken to Richmond Police Headquarters and questioned separately for several hours. And their testimony, along with the medical examiner's report that Adam had died of alcohol poisoning, which essentially is an alcohol overdose, all of this information led them to rule that Adam's death was hazing.
So are they being charged with hazing, or are they being charged with providing alcohol to an underage minor at this point, or is it something else?
That's a good question. So all 11 of the brothers were in fact charged with a Class 1 misdemeanor based on Virginia laws and a charge of purchasing and providing alcohol to a minor. Now, these charges would carry a possible sentence of up to a year in prison and over $2,500 in fines. Now, the interesting part about this, Megan, is they were placed in county jail and they were seemingly denied bond. Now, I could not find any reason as to why their bond would be denied. It doesn't seem like the kind of case where it would be, but it's possible because they were arrested very late on a Friday. So maybe it was the weekend, so things took longer to get processed. Have you heard of this before?
Well, it's possible they couldn't get in front of a judge quick enough. So it's not necessarily that they were denied bond. They just had to wait on bond, which is possible. And they were just denied, you know what I mean? Denied temporarily until they could see a judge.
Yeah, actually, I was just talking about this with my students recently, and a lot of my students didn't realize that only a judge can set the bond, because sometimes on TV and in movies, it almost seems as if the police are the ones who are involved in the bail process, but it's up to the judge to make that determination.
There's an intake process at some jails where it does appear that whoever's doing intake is going to be setting, the bond at the time. But ultimately, it still is at the authority of a judge. So, there might be a situation in certain jails where a judge says or authorizes representatives to grant bond in certain cases at certain levels, but it still remains up to a judge whether to even impose that kind of condition.
And also, this is a case where somebody died.
Yeah.
It's not totally clear what the circumstances are. So, yeah, I would bet that the judge is not going to be authorizing anyone to make that type of decision for him.
Sure.
Meanwhile, on that same evening of February 27th, 2 sheriff officers showed up to the Oaks family home in Potomac Falls to tell Adam's parents, Linda and Eric, that their son had died. The loss of their only child was absolutely devastating. Adam had been incredibly close with both of his parents. His mother saying that they used to stay up till 4 a.m. playing video games together, and that she would also pick him up late at night sometimes when he was at friends' houses. And unfortunately, she would never get another one of these 4 a.m. calls from her son. When Adam's father, Eric, asked the officers how his 19-year-old son had died at college, he recalled being told, quote, "Alcohol was a factor and we don't detect any foul play." Now, as I mentioned, the 11 fraternity brothers spent the weekend in jail awaiting to speak to a judge on Monday morning. At their hearing, 4 of the 11 immediately took a guilty plea, including Adam's big brother, Andrew White. Andrew recalled having no second thoughts about his guilty plea. In fact, in a documentary for the Love Like Adam Foundation, Andrew stated, quote, "I was guilty. I provided him the bottle. I hazed him by having him drink it. And to put the family through some sort of trial, it was just unfathomable to have them relive that."
I'm glad to see that he demonstrated such accountability and remorse and responsibility right away.
And Delta Chi's president, Jason Mulgrew, also told the documentary, quote, "I had to look them in the eye and tell them that I'm sorry I didn't do anything. I was there. I was the president and I didn't do anything about it." So you're right. These young men are taking accountability, showing remorse. But how would this all shake out? Would any of them end up going to prison for this? Well, it turns out that they would not go to prison. The judge decided to go with a restorative justice approach.
Ah, okay. Do you teach restorative justice in your classes at all, Amy?
When I talk about purposes of punishment, we talk about deterrence, rehabilitation, and capacitation. In other words, what's the reason why we punish people? One of the reasons I teach about is we punish people for the goal of restorative justice, which is basically to make the victim whole again, to give back to the community. And I think in a case like this where we don't see the criminal intent, that nobody wanted Adam to die. Every single person was mourning this tremendous loss. I do think this is the right move. I mean, Andrew White, Adam's big brother, he was given 2 years suspended jail time. So he didn't actually spend time in jail, but he was on probation. And I think that's the right move as well. But for those 2 years, Andrew also had to complete 100 hours of community service, perform 5 anti-hazing presentations, and participate in a restorative justice program with the Oaks family, in which Andrew had to answer any and all questions that the family had about the night that Adam died. And this is through a mediated counseling session, the way we see in other restorative practices.
So for the restorative justice model, as I understand it, the Oaks family, the other victims, secondary victims, have to agree to participate and kind of have to give a blessing for this model to prevail. So I assume the Oaks family was in favor of this approach somewhat.
Yes, and as we'll hear later from some of the family statements, I think although the family wants someone to be held accountable for this tremendous loss, I think they also recognize that none of this was intentional, in the sense that everyone really loved his son and nobody wanted to see him harmed at all.
Yeah.
Jason Mulgrew, again, who is Delta Chi's president, pled no contest, which essentially is the same as pleading guilty. It just means you're not outright admitting to guilt or innocence. Now, he was sentenced to 12 months suspension, requiring him to perform 150 hours of community service, perform 10 anti-hazing presentations, and also participate in the restorative justice program with the Oakes family. And when I say 12 months suspension, what I mean is 12 months of a suspended sentence.
So for anyone who doesn't know, a suspended sentence is one that you do not serve at the time unless you get in some type of trouble or violate any of the conditions of your sentence, and then it triggers you to have to serve the full sentence. So you would have to serve 12 months in jail or prison.
Yes, that is correct. And 4 of the other young men who pled guilty were given similar sentences to Andrew, in which they had to perform several hours of community service and present anti-hazing programs. The other 5 had their charges dropped by the prosecution. Now, those 5 had not been charged with hazing, just with providing alcohol to minors. Because I would imagine they had to determine who was actually involved in the chugging of the alcohol versus who purchased the alcohol. It wasn't probably very clear-cut what was going on here.
Sure. And some of them probably were much less culpable, too.
Yeah, it sounds like the 2, the big brother and the president were the ones who took, I don't want to say the fall, but the ones that were the most involved in the situation.
They were probably the most culpable.
Correct. But while the courts felt the matter was closed, and Eric and Linda Oakes did believe that Andrew White and the other brothers did not mean to kill their son via alcohol poisoning, the family did not find the justice to be very restorative. As Eric told the media, quote, "I lost so much that night. My only child. I sent him off to VCU to get a higher education, and they sent him back in a body bag."
Oh, well, I mean, has every right to feel that way, yeah.
And Eric and Linda particularly felt justice hadn't been served after it came to light that the Delta Chi fraternity had several infractions and violations with VCU prior to Adam becoming a pledge. So between 2008 and 2018, VCU had charged the frat with several infractions, including inciting fighting, consistently providing alcohol to underage students, breaking university rules surrounding alcohol, and hosting unauthorized parties. In addition, in over 7 semesters in that decade, Delta Chi members all had failing grade point averages. Lastly, the fraternity was mentioned in 4 sexual assault complaints between 2014 and 2018. Now, you and I both were in the Greek world, so we know how these things go. But this kind of brings up, I keep picturing the movie Animal House. Even the part where Adam is gifted the handle of Jack Daniels, it reminds me of the scene in Animal House where John Belushi downs an entire handle when the frat is being shut down. Right. I'm not saying this frat was inspired by that movie, but at least back when we were in college, this was normal. This was how people... all of those infractions they cited, those are not surprising to me given what I saw on my campus.
No, most of the fraternities I knew had those infractions. Although, let me just say, I'm aware that sexual assaults happen in fraternities, but I wasn't aware of several allegations of assaults at several different fraternities while I was there. So that part I'm not sure about, to be perfectly frank, but the other infractions are very common, I would say, to fraternities, unfortunately, sadly. But I assume that the Oakes didn't know about this long list ahead of time or when they agreed to participate, or they might have felt differently.
Well, you're absolutely right, because the Oakes said they knew nothing about this history because it was not posted anywhere on VCU's website or Delta Chi's page. So basically, Adam could have never known that the frat he was pledging carried such a sordid past. Now, I just want to say that in 2018, VCU did give the fraternity a 4-year suspension. But based on an appeal filed by Delta Chi's then president, the university downgraded the suspension to 1 year, and then this frat was reinstated in 2020, which was only 1 year before Adam had hoped to be a pledge.
That also happened to a lot of fraternities I knew as well. They were suspended but reinstated.
So due to the fact that, the family felt like they should have known, there should have been some more information about, some of the past infractions, the family sued the Delta Chi National Fraternity for $28 million in a wrongful death lawsuit in February of 2023.
Wow. Good for them.
Part of the suit was due to the fact that the incorporated arm of the fraternity had the power to revoke the charter of any chapter or terminate its association if there were dangerous incidents. And at no point in the decade of infractions against the VCU chapter did the National Fraternity take any action against VCU Delta Chi. In addition, when the college suspended the chapter, not only did their then president appeal the suspension, but they hired legal counsel to get their chapter fully reinstated with no oversight from the National Fraternity.
I'm not sure when the National Fraternity has to intervene, but sounds like a case where it would have been warranted.
Yeah, I don't know much about, the rules governing those associations, but yes, this definitely sounds like if ever, this was the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Oaks family also sued the university in an earlier wrongful death lawsuit in which they settled out of court for $1 million, and that was in September of 2022.
We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
But Megan, the Oaks legal action has since gone much farther than just filing lawsuits. Not long after Adam's untimely death, Eric Oaks partnered with Virginia Senator Jennifer Boysko on creating new policies around hazing. The pair created a set of 2 bills, one with an educational component and one with a criminal component. The education bill, now called Adams Law, stipulates the following. First, universities must maintain and publicly report violations of any hazing laws. And this is be it the institutional, state, or federal laws. And this needs to be done on an annual basis.
Yeah, I'd say that's good policy.
Yes, these reports must be posted on their university homepage and or on the Greek Life webpage. Okay. Next, these reports must be kept for 10 years in order to show a pattern of violation or unsafe activity in certain Greek Life chapters. Furthermore, any recorded violations would be annually sent to the Timothy J. Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research and Reform. And the purpose of this would be so that the center could update the Greek Life national cards to provide easily accessible documentation of all fraternity and sorority hazing incidents. Lastly, it stipulates that all members, potential members, and advisors of Greek Life are compelled to take extensive, current, and in-person education about the dangers of hazing, and this would include alcohol intoxication and institutional laws and policies surrounding hazing incidents.
So, Amy, that's all part of the educational bill, the one Adams Law, correct?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm going to get to the criminal side in a minute because things are a little bit more complicated on that side, as you could probably guess.
I would imagine. What you just listed sounds like good policy to me, but I'm curious what the criminal provisions are.
Not only is it good policy, it's easily implemented policy, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah.
And Virginia's General Assembly agreed as well because on July 1st of 2022, Adams Law was officially amended to become part of its already existing hazing laws in Virginia.
Okay, good.
Okay, so now let's get to the criminal side. Eric Oaks was pushing for hazing to become classified as a felony, which would fall under manslaughter in Virginia. And this would be instead of a Class 1 misdemeanor, which it was at the time of the death.
That's a significant difference.
Very significant. And the House actually voted in Eric's favor, but the Senate did not, calling for full immunity to anyone reporting a hazing incident in the case of the crime being raised to a felony. So this would have gotten all 11 of the frat brothers off the hook, since they all did call 911 when they couldn't wake up Adam. So what would be the benefit of turning this into a felony charge? Well, first, the Oaks were very angry that no one from the fraternity faced any jail time for the death of their son, which seems a little contradictory to me because earlier statements said that they understood that nobody purposely harmed their son. But I would imagine as you go through the grieving process, your feelings probably change.
Also, again, as they learned about the history of kind of bad behavior, alleged bad behavior, they probably felt differently.
Secondly, Senator Boysko explained that the point of the felony charge was not to flood the prisons with college-aged adults who made bad decisions, but to create prevention and as a deterrent. Now, in their view, if the students knew that they would be looking down the barrel of a long prison sentence for knowingly and deliberately telling someone that they must drink a gallon of whiskey at initiation, they'd probably be much less likely to make that part of their initiation ceremony. But I have to say, in order for it to act as a deterrent, the students would need to be aware of that law, and I simply don't think that all students are aware of the laws, even if they tried to publicize if this went through.
Yeah, deterrence does not work very often because of lack of awareness, but I would think that in this case they would make sure it was very well communicated.
Yeah, because that's the whole point of it, is to act as a deterrent. Right. Yep. So the bill continued to go back and forth, and Senator Boysko suggested that they table it for a while and come back to it at a later time. Now, in the meantime, the Oaks have not only brought about that policy change we just discussed, but they also founded the Love Like Adam Foundation. And this is a nonprofit whose mission is to support, educate, and equip students, families, law enforcement officers, and other stakeholders with hazing prevention education. And not only do they bring awareness to hazing issues through outreach, presentations, and workshops, but they also provide an annual scholarship to high school students who emulate Adam's qualities.
Oh, that's nice.
Adam's family became huge activists around the issue of hazing, but what did the university and the national fraternity do? Well, for starters, VCU suspended all 11 of the young men who were involved in Adam's death. The university also terminated Delta Chi's charter, as well as permanently banned the fraternity from ever having a chapter at the school again. In September of 2021, the university published 2 investigations into Greek life with findings that suggested that there had been multiple incidents of hazing and binge drinking, and it also noted that staff had had a lot of trouble in rectifying these issues. And I would imagine every university struggles with this.
Yeah, I think so, for quite some time until they decide to basically move the houses off campus or just eliminate them.
Well, actually, one of the things the university did was they announced that it banned all alcohol at Greek life events. And I don't think that's rare. I think a lot of colleges had gone that direction, that especially on-campus events.
So yeah, a lot of colleges moved to dry campuses in the early 2000s.
In February of 2023, VCU held a vigil for Adam on the 2nd anniversary of his death, and this is where they unveiled a plaque and bench to commemorate him. After the vigil, the Love Like Adam Foundation premiered a new hazing prevention training video that VCU designed in conjunction with the Oaks family, and students also partook in hazing prevention activities. Today, the website has a webpage dedicated to Adam's story on their Fraternity and Sorority Life website. Now, what about the fraternity response? Well, the National Delta Chi fraternity permanently expelled all 11 members involved in Adam's death. Their president has commented to the press that the National Delta Chi has anti-hazing programs already on the books and that the fraternity will continue to fund hazing prevention research as well as support anti-hazing legislation. Now, since they are currently in a lawsuit with the Oaks, neither the fraternity or the family were willing to say anything else on the record.
Oh, the lawsuit is ongoing. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we know Adam's story, and I'm sure that our listeners already had some fundamental understanding of what hazing is and some of the larger issues surrounding hazing. But I want to take a minute to discuss why hazing can be so difficult to navigate.
Sure.
Unlike bullying, it can be difficult to identify because it's not necessarily insidious or cruel. As Senator Boyskow states, many kids don't even realize that they're being hazed. And in fact, other students may not even realize that what they're doing to someone else is hazing because there's such a fine line.
Point that out.
Yeah, because, these kids in college think they're having fun. And, again, I'm relating this to back when I was in college. You would tell someone like chug, chug, chug as they're drinking because it's fun. And you never think about the potential for something to go wrong.
Or the fact that it might be some form of coercive behavior.
Exactly. That, to me, that could be hazing, right? In hindsight, I probably hazed people or people hazed me, and you just don't realize at the time.
Right.
And this was also clear in Andrew White's final statements at his sentencing, in which he stated that he was filled with gut-wrenching pain when he learned of Adam's death and felt that he was living through a nightmare. He went on to say that he never had any ill will towards Adam at all, and that Andrew's goal throughout the ceremony was only to lift Adam's spirits. And I actually believe him. I do not believe he had any ill will at all here.
No, I don't think this was malicious. It didn't seem that way.
And Andrew also stated that Adam had not been shamed or maltreated at all at the ceremony, and that Andrew had been very excited to take Adam on as his little brother. Based on all of Andrew's public statements, it really didn't seem like he saw the ceremonial whiskey chugging as hazing, and since Adam took the bottle and seemed to be having a good time, everything seemed consensual to everyone there. However, according to the Gordy Center to End Hazing, this is exactly where the problem lies because, quote, students want to feel like they worked hard to achieve the privilege of being part of a group. And one of the most persistent challenges in ending hazing is that many students believe hazing victims have willingly agreed. But the psychology of hazing makes consent nearly impossible. How can someone consent to an activity when the details are purposefully hidden from them? And of course, a person cannot consent when they are intoxicated or high. And perhaps this was the case for Adam Oaks. Now, we can't know what he was thinking in the moment he took that Jack Daniels handle. Maybe he was unsure if he should do it. Maybe he didn't want to be made fun of or looked down on. Or maybe, he had already began drinking and he wasn't in the position to make an informed decision for himself. We don't know what his level of intoxication was even at that point.
I mean, all of those things are possible. The one thing that I probably think is that he would not have drank that entire bottle under other circumstances.
Yeah, but we can't know. Like, did he want to actively participate in this activity? Maybe he didn't care about the consequences, but I think more likely, maybe he didn't realize the consequences because we're talking about someone who's still mature. Who knows? Maybe he hasn't drank a lot in his life and he wasn't educated on the effects of drinking that much alcohol.
I saw young fraternity men when I was in college drink incredible amounts as well. And I'm sure they were really unaware of what the consequences could have been.
Yeah. And, while we'll never really know, what Adam was thinking, luckily the culture around hazing has made a massive shift in the past several years. And luckily we don't hear about these cases as often as we had in the past.
True.
So how can we change the culture to prevent hazing and to prevent tragedies like this from happening? Well, the Love Like Adam Foundation is not the only nonprofit working to end hazing. There are several organizations working towards this venture if our listeners would like to check them out. Now, we obviously encourage you to check out the Oaks Foundation at lovelikeadam.com, but you can also get educational resources through the Gordy Center for Ending Hazing at gordy.studenthealth.virginia.edu. And you can find information about the history of hazing through the research of Professor Hank Newar at hanknewar.com. And all of these will be in our show notes for anyone who would like to take a look. And for any of our student listeners who may be interested in knowing how to prevent an alcohol overdose at your own university, here are a few tips from the Gordy Center. First of all, never leave a drunk friend to just sleep it off. And importantly, know the signs of alcohol poisoning, such as vomiting while passed out, unresponsive to pinching or shaking, irregular, raspy, or shallow breathing, skin that has turned cold and clammy, or lips and or nail beds that are blue. And no matter what, if you feel there's any danger, always call 911 and or your campus's police department for emergency services.
Sorry, Amy, I'd like to add something before we go. One of the most successful policy campaigns in reducing harmful behavior has been the anti-smoking campaign in our country, witnessing massive reductions in smokers over several years. And one of the things they didn't do was to use criminal legislation to punish or make smoking illegal. And I think that was really smart. They treated it like a public health problem with a public health approach in which they pulled every different lever to kind of help. So instead, they made smoking a little bit grosser, right? Attached a stigma to it, made it a little bit harder, so you couldn't do it in certain places. They made the price a little bit more expensive so that it became more costly. And they also flooded the market with real education about smoking prevention and also the consequences. I see hazing could be prevented and reduced, and probably has been, with that type of approach, which I think would be incredibly more effective than just punishment.
I agree. You also left out the pictures that they put on the boxes of cigarettes. Do you recall those? Do they still do that?
Yeah, I don't know if they still do that. No.
Like of people's lungs, like smokers' lungs, and they would have it right on the packages of cigarettes?
Yes, absolutely. So warnings about what could possibly happen. I think all of it taken together was really effective, though. And again, it did not involve criminalization or making it illegal. So I think it was more effective.
Thank you, Megan. That's a really good point. And while nothing will bring back Adam Oakes, we hope that this episode helps spread awareness about the hazards of Greek life hazing and also helps to keep Adam's memory alive. Before we go today, if you'd like to support Campus Killings, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts.
Your subscription will get you VIP access to all the shows on the network that not only includes hundreds of episodes of ad-free listening, but also bonus content and early access to episodes.
For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting this show in the process.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and search for either Campus Killings or AbJack, and you can start your subscription with a free trial.
Your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Campus Killings.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg. with research and writing by Abigail Belcastro. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings or on Facebook at facebook.com/campuskillings. You can also visit the show's homepage at campuskillings.com. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.